It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today.
Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill. And today, as mentioned on a previous episode, we want to dive a little bit more into labs, blood labs, functional testing, all of the things. And what do those ranges actually look like through a conventional medicine lens, which is what we're typically accustomed to when we go to the doctor and get, a routine blood draw, versus a functional lab panel, and what the difference is, again, through the lens that it's looked at, right? And how we compare it to other things. So I think that these reference ranges, or the important thing to understand about these reference ranges when it comes to conventional medicine and just the job of conventional medicine, is to detect a disease state. And if you're in a disease state, then you're presented with medications to resolve these issues, right? Now, there are certainly times where you need a medication to get relief or calm something down so that you can make the lifestyle changes that you need to make, right? If blood pressure is critically high and you are at risk of a stroke, yeah, you need a blood pressure medication, right? Now, are there health changes that you can make and lifestyle changes that you can make to improve that? Yeah, of course, right? Now there's genetics and all of these other factors, but through functional lens, we want to look at a more proactive approach to health. And we're looking at it through, the word optimal is used a lot. What's optimal means you're thriving, you feel good, you have energy to live your life, right? We want you to be healthy on a cellular level, where conventional is there, and it is very necessary in life to make sure that you are not in a critical state of disease, right? Detecting cancer, detecting high cholesterol, all of these things. So that's the difference. But I think one of the big frustrations is that a lot of times we go to conventional and expect a functional approach, and that's just not what they're here for, right? So we have to make sure that we understand the job of each of these different ways to facilitate health management, so that we can advocate for ourselves effectively, right? You don't have to go on thyroid medication if you don't want to, right? I never did, but there are people that choose to and absolutely need to, and all of those things. So I think just understanding that difference is important. And then I want to go through too, how we actually interpret labs and what the role of functional testing is when it comes to health and physique change and all of these things. So I think this can be a really important conversation for people to understand and have the right expectations about what they get out of these labs. And at the end of the day, it's important to remember too that labs are just information. No matter what the information says, the lifestyle changes and the changes to your nutrition and your health and your movement have to happen in your day-to-day life, and they take time, right? So I think just understanding the lens that we're looking at these things through, and then what the management of those things actually looks like. So if we go into conventional lab ranges, if you go to your doctor and they say, annual checkup, I'm going to order a panel for you. There are ranges that you'll see on your blood work, right? And they're like, cool, you're in within normal limits, you're good to go, right? Now, the problem with that is those reference ranges are based on Gen Pop. I always describe this as, what is Gen Pop, or how do we typically perceive it in the United States of America? They are overweight, overstressed, they're tired, right?
Unhealthy.
Yeah, they're not healthy. So they are saying we do not detect anything at a disease level. There's nothing critical requiring intervention of conventional medicine right now. That does
critical does not mean healthy, right? So just because you're normal doesn't mean that you're healthy. So that's the differentiator when Jill is saying, hey, we look at optimal ranges. What we are looking at is, hey, amongst the healthiest of people, what are now these ranges, which are a lot smaller than those ranges that you'll see on the form that you get from LabCorp. So we're not looking at conventional ranges. Now, I think we kind of touched on this last episode too. The numbers aren't the only thing that matters. Your symptoms matter, right? So just because I'm not in a perfectly optimal range with this one thing doesn't mean I need to go out of my way to go do some crazy protocol or something, right? when we want to look deeper is when you're experiencing symptoms and you go to the doctor and they're like, yep, normal, normal, normal. Well, this one is a little higher. This one's a little low, but pretty much you're good. And I'm like, but I don't feel good. I've had postpartum depression now for 8 months. What is going on in my body? Like something's clearly not right based on my symptoms, but you're telling me I'm normal. Okay. Now we're going to go look at what are optimal ranges. And then we're going to compare trends. We're not just looking at one single lab marker. We're looking at trends because those trends are now painting a picture for us. So somebody's trends may paint the picture that, there's some sort of gut dysbiosis going on. Somebody else's trends, my labs, may indicate, there's some level of systemic stress and like adrenal hypo or hyperfunction because your body's constantly running on stress, 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 and maybe not sleeping enough, right? So based on the different trends that we might see, we're then able to shift gears and say, okay, here's our first level of intervention, and it's going to be a little bit different for each person.
Yeah. So when a lab falls inside a reference interval, the example I always use that I think paints a really good picture is that, glucose could present as normal for many years leading up to prediabetes or a diabetes diagnosis, right? Insulin is doing its job, right? It's doing its job, even though your habits and your lifestyle and your behaviors and nutrition might be not favorable for that area of your health, right? Insulin is doing its job by keeping it down, but eventually your body compensates, right? So it's compensating and it's like, all right, you're making me work overtime here and I can do this for a little, but I can't do this forever. And that's where things like insulin resistance come into play, right? So it's important to understand the compensation that happens for your body that will not reflect on a panel immediately through a conventional lens. So we have to make sure that we aren't trying to get an answer to a question that those labs are not designed to answer.
And then the second piece is that we're typically ordering more labs than they would order at a normal physical. So a lot of times women will say, oh, I think I might have a slow thyroid or this and that because I have this stubborn body fat or whatever. But my TSH is totally normal. Okay, well, do you have your whole thyroid panel? No, my doctor only ordered this one thing, right? So that's just one example. Jill gave another really good one, right? So if somebody wants to dive into their thyroid, part of our normal comprehensive panel is going to include TSH, free T3, free T4, the TPO antibodies. If insulin resistance, we're not just looking at blood glucose fasted on one particular day, we're looking at their A1C and their blood insulin. We are looking at inflammatory markers that, again, if a doctor does not have a reason to order because they don't suspect it needs treated right now, I'm trying to think of an example like CRP, C-reactive protein. I've had clients whose doctors are like, no, you don't need that because you don't have a imminent heart issue right now. Well, it's a really great inflammatory. It's really good in terms of indication of systemic inflammation. If we look at things like CRP or homocysteine, those aren't normally on a blood panel from your doctor. So not only are we narrowing the scope of normal versus optimal, we're also looking at more markers so that we can see trends that are fuller.
Yeah. So to that point, normal labs can absolutely exist alongside symptoms. And you have to understand too that, and where I think there is a little bit of a flaw when it comes to conventional health management is that symptoms are one of the first or early signs that something is becoming less efficient, less resilient, less supported. Compensation is happening in the body. Even if the marker has not entered a diagnostic threshold to detect a disease state, which we don't want, right? We want to get ahead of that before that happens. So I think one of the biggest flaws in conventional medicine, and I'm not faulting the doctors themselves because they are trained the way that they are trained, but the gap that I think is creating a health crisis right now is that we don't feel good as a society. We're tired, we're stressed, we're all of these things, but we are not educated on how to manage that, or we're not educated on who to turn to for support, which is why I love functional medicine so much, because we go through things at such a granular level. And even if I see a normal, putting that in air quotes, marker on somebody, if they're symptomatic, something is off, right? So if we see, okay, somebody has hair loss, fatigue, all of these things, but the thyroid's not really reflecting that on a panel, great. What's the next layer that we need to look at here? Because it doesn't mean that your thyroid's not being impacted. It could be that your body is compensating and fighting to regulate something, but it's getting tired, right? And your symptoms are reflecting that. So I think that's important to understand with trends and clusters and patterns versus looking at labs in isolation.
And we want to be proactive, even if somebody doesn't have symptoms. For myself, right? I'm pretty healthy. I feel pretty healthy at this stage of my life right now. However, if my insulin is climbing year over year, there is absolutely, without a doubt, a correlation between that and people someday getting dementia. They're just as simple as the analogy of somebody who doesn't strength train someday is at higher risk of osteoporosis, right? If we can look at these different lab trends and actually start to reverse some of them, you're less likely to have horrible menopausal symptoms when you go into menopause, or less likelihood of dementia when you age, right? Like all of those things. Wow, what a quality of life changer if you can optimize them while you're younger and healthier.
Yeah. And then when we're looking at functional lab ranges, like what functional lab ranges are actually trying to assess, again, we want to look at this through a much more proactive lens, correlate it with your symptoms. Okay, so we're looking at labs and symptoms, and we're saying, what's the connection here, right? With how you feel, when did this start, what triggered this, which we'll talk about the environment and the actual body in a second. But functional ranges are typically much narrower ranges or targets used to assess what's going on in the system, right? So we're asking a different question, or we're answering a different question in functional medicine than conventional is. And again, they both have their place and all of those things, but we're not here to diagnose disease, right? That's not the point of functional medicine. That is the point of conventional medicine and why it exists. Functional is designed, in the way that we use this, in the way that we help people get healthy, is that we want to recognize the signs and the symptoms that are telling us, hey, this is the direction we're heading, and I don't want you to get there, right? So these are the changes that you can make now in your life.
Preventative healthcare, so that you can have like vitality and thrive in life, as opposed to, oh, shoot, we have this disease and we need to fix the disease, which is also a very important skill set, right? This is, okay, I want to become the healthiest version of myself and prevent disease.
And also understand one of the flaws, I think, in this world of instant results is that there are people going to functional medicine and they're getting a good interpretation of the landscape and what's going on, but then they're being given these really extensive supplement protocols, but no one's addressing what drove that dysfunction, right? So that is the other point to understand with proactive health and seeing these markers, is that even through a functional lens, at the end of the day, it's just information, and we need to know that we've got to do something with the information to drive that change. So that leads me into the next topic of this, is that the body that the lab is representing matters, right? Because we have to understand the environment that drove this dysfunction. And then we also have to understand that the same value in two different people can mean two totally different things. So I'll have people message me and be like, hey, my X, Y, and Z is high. What do you think? And I'm like, I know absolutely fucking nothing about you, right? Your lifestyle for the last 1, 3, 5, 10 years, your nutrition history, your fucking personal trauma issues, right? Like there are so many things to understand when we are looking at this through a biological and physiological lens. I want you to be optimal and healthy. And yeah, at the end of the day, if you have an insulin of fucking 15, yeah, you have insulin resistance in those two people, right? But what is the driver of that? There could be somebody who has been chronically dieting keto for 10 years versus somebody who is super high stress that has been driving their glucose through the roof that insulin's been trying to manage, right? So those are two totally different approaches to that. And the protocol itself might not be different, but knowing what the driver was of that dysfunction is going to allow me to help that person a lot more effectively and understand what drove that, where it came from, what their symptoms are, and how I can ensure that I resolve their symptoms and improve their markers, but also ensure that it's not a problem again in the future. So when we're looking at these labs, again, we're not looking for disease. We're asking, when we're looking at metabolism and hormones and gut health and physique, we're asking whether the body is in a state that can support the outcome that the client wants, right? So somebody's coming to me and saying, I want to lose 30 pounds, but I think I have high cortisol and that's preventing me from losing. You feel what you feel, right? We are inundated with information in this present day and age. But we have to understand if that internal environment can support the change that somebody wants to see, right? And why we have evolved the way that we have within Fueled is that if you have gut dysbiosis, if you have recurrent SIBO, if you have these inflammatory responses that are happening, if you, no matter what you do, you feel like no matter what you do, your thyroid numbers just won't get better, or your levothyroxine dose keeps going up, we have to know what lens are we looking through and make sure that you understand the outcome that you want. These are the 5 steps that you got to take first, or whatever it is, right? Before you can get to that outcome. And
because diving right into a diet, like if you go into a low enough diet, you will see body fat loss, but also that now is adding another stressor to your system. That's a dial turning up a stressor. So we might not recommend that, even though you're like, yeah, but fat loss will be healthier for me. Yeah, but the other approaches won't also add a stress that will have impacts negatively in these other areas. So we could do it in this order instead and still ultimately get you the results, but also have you be healthier for it.
And could you build shelter by hand with a hammer, a nail, and some wood? Yeah. Are there much more efficient ways for you to build a shelter that is more efficient, more stable, more long-standing? That's really the difference, right? Like, sure, I can put anybody in a fucking deficit to lose weight, but how efficient is it going to be? How well spent is our time in that deficit? Or can we fill in some gaps, pop in the bricks that are missing, and then you have this beautiful foundation, and then building your house is way easier, it's way faster, it's way more efficient, and it's going to fucking last longer, right? So like, that's the other difference that you have to understand too through this protocol execution. Sometimes people don't like my suggestions, or they don't like to hear me say, hey, your GI map says X, Y, and Z. I know you wanted to start your deficit at this point. What do you want to prioritize here? Because we can go fat loss route, and this is what that'll look like if we go into a deficit now and put these gut symptoms that you're complaining about every week on the back burner, or we can take care of this from the inside out and make you healthy and well-rounded. And then fat loss is going to be so much easier and also more sustainable.
And some people do make that first choice. And then 6 months, a year later, they're still complaining about their symptoms. And it's like, well, you chose that path and you got to own whichever path you choose. There's 2 things that I want to touch on that you had, one that you had mentioned earlier. You said like the body that the lab comes from matters, right? We're not only looking at this piece of paper, we're looking at the person, their history, everything. The behaviors that those labs came from matter. That is almost even more important than the body, or the genetics play a factor too, right? We have somebody on our team who specializes in genetic testing. Yes, all of these different factors matter, but the behaviors matter. We were just talking about one of my clients where I'm like, I don't know, she's doing so many of the right things, but she's in this wound up stress cycle. And that's her default is go, analyze, overanalyze, worry. And I'm like, she's doing all the right things per the protocol, but we need her brain to freaking slow down because it's stress, right? And her labs are kind of reflecting that piece. So it's kind of like playing detective and trying to figure out which puzzle piece is most important for each person. Second thing I wanted to say, because specifically speaking to some of the women that we've coached in the past when we were doing primarily muscle building phases and fat loss phases and less functional health, and speaking to anybody who is not at a place where they are ready to go get all these extensive labs or anything like that, the basics that we always talk about, the fundamentals, the reason we start every single client, and in the past we have started every client in a muscle building phase as opposed to a fat loss phase, is because through a proper muscle building phase, and while we're working on reducing stress, improving sleep, adding nourishment, increasing the amount of calories, adding effective strength training with rest days as opposed to higher intensity workouts, dialing back intensity. All of that was very strategic. So even if you don't have your labs from start to the finish of that specific build phase, the reason we start with that is because it does improve many of these markers at an underlying baseline level. Now we work with clients where a lot of them actually have the data to prove it, which is pretty cool. But if you are somebody who's like, okay, I'm not at a place where I'm ready to hire you guys or hire a functional practitioner or get these labs, start by getting strong 3 days a week, recovering on the other days, get lots of walks outside, add fruits, vegetables, proteins that come from the animal, eat more food, stop dieting all the time. And oftentimes what we would find is a lot of women's, I don't want to say alleged symptoms, they had these symptoms coming in, and their gut and hormone related symptoms started to reduce on their own. Now, we have a handful that didn't, right? Let's say 10% of that group, their symptoms didn't improve. And then it's like, oh shit, okay, now we need to reverse it a little bit. And we have to do these deeper labs and figure out what specifically we can treat. And again, I shouldn't use the word treat. What we can work upstream on to change the behavior so that the body's trickle downs are operating more effectively. But we get really, really good outcomes on people's labs, even just from doing the basics. So again, if you have worked with us in the past and haven't done all of this stuff, there's still a reason we did it in that order. And I still stand behind that strongly because I think a lot of people's numbers improve just from that alone.
And the other side of that, I guess, is anybody can run labs. Anybody can wake up and say, I want all the functional labs today. I want a blood panel. I want a Dutch test. I want a GI map. Cool. Anybody can obtain that information on themselves, right? The women that we work with tend to have paid other providers to try to address a longstanding issue that they haven't been able to resolve yet. And or it's the level of the pain that you're in. How much is this affecting your day to day? A lot of people are like, I know and understand, and I'm willing to make those changes to get more sunshine and eat more colors. And I know I need to eat more food, and I know I need to lift heavy weights and do those lifestyle changes, right? That Jess is saying, really anybody can get healthy through those things, right? But there are people, and I can speak to this personally from back when I was going through my miscarriages, and I just felt like I was having an out of body experience where I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't feel like I know this like shell that I'm living in.
And you were doing all the right, I want to say, like we were working together through that time. She was doing the right things. She was strength training. She wasn't overly abusing her body with intensity many days a week. She was in a proper build phase, eating very nutrient dense foods. She was getting sleep and really strict about that time, right? So like, I want to point that out because a lot of women are not doing that kind of stuff. That's the population that we're talking to today is, hey, you really truly are nourishing and taking care of your body. And then these symptoms are still, something is out of whack very clearly. My sister-in-law is like that right now where I'm like, oh my gosh, she would be a perfect client in terms of she's doing all the right things. And then so that's a sign that something's off.
It's how much pain you're in and the level of dysfunction. And if like I was waking up and I was like, it is impacting my love life. It is impacting my social life. It's impacting my confidence to never know when I'm going to be bloated. For me, it was like, I just want this data. I don't want to guess. I want to take the fastest path to fix this. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Now you can be unhealthy and have horrible habits, get labs and still make the changes, right? Like it doesn't matter. It just depends. Like I think that information is incredibly valuable. And I think that a lot of people too, kind of suffer in silence, or they feel like their concerns and their feelings aren't being heard or addressed. And I think that one of the beautiful things that functional labs can give us is validation to our feelings, because I do think, I hate this word, but it's really valid, is because I lived this experience personally. We're gaslit to say, like a girl on TikTok the other day told me, my doctor said, this is the new you, get used to it. When she went in there saying, I don't feel good and my quality of life is being impacted and I need help. That was the answer. So I think the validation in that regard of like, it doesn't matter if you are 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. I don't care. At any point you can say, I don't feel as good as I can. And I'm willing to make the investment in myself, time, financial, whatever it is, to get this information and optimize it and change it and improve it.
And make changes to do so. And again, I keep bringing it back to the behavioral inputs because a lot of people want those answers and then they want to keep living how they were living before. They're like, hey, give me a supplement to fix it. And it's not truly going to improve unless you also improve the behaviors that created that environment in the first place.
Right. Your body reflects the environment it's in, right? How well it's fueled, how much stress it's carrying, how much sleep you're getting, the quality of food that you're taking in. I can see on a GI map that somebody has been chronically under eating and under fueling. And in their head, they might be like, but I eat healthy. I eat fruits and veggies every day. And it's like, well, your GI map is telling me otherwise, right? Because you're lacking diet variety. You're lacking enough nutrients. You're lacking all of those things. So we can see that, and it's fine, right? I don't expect the person that's coming to me asking me for help to have those answers. So there's a gap there, right? Like that's my job. But you have to understand that no matter what any lab says or any provider tells you, if your body is in a state of dysfunction, if it's not losing weight the way that you want it to, if you're bloated, you're tired, you're X, Y, and Z, it is reflecting the environment and the inputs of your day-to-day life. And those have to change. I'll give you supplements that are going to target your gut bacteria and help you rebalance and help move the needle more quickly. But you have to understand that your environment and your behaviors and your inputs have to change in order to reflect. Now supplements can sometimes do the heavy lifting. I see people who have horrible habits. They get on a gut protocol from a naturopath, take all these supplements, their cabinet's full of them, and they're like, yay, I feel better, no more symptoms. Guess what? That lasts maybe 90 days. You want to know why? Because they didn't fucking change their behaviors.
They're still drinking wine every single day. They're not exercising. They're not seeing the sunshine, and they're going to bed at 2 a.m.
for you. Yeah. That's it. And you didn't actually resolve the problem, which again,
it helped it temporarily.
It's just symptom relief, which is what conventional does a lot of times too. We're treating symptoms in isolation, and that defeats the purpose of true root cause health and true vitality in your life. So I think that's just important to understand, that you have to look at the body, the environment, the lifestyle, which is why we go through this audit period initially. It's very revealing in our first 3 to 4 weeks with a client, because again, they self-identify as a healthy eater. I'm very health conscious. I do all these things. I avoid X, Y, and Z, right? But then when we look at the reality of it, it's not that I think they were lying to me. It's that their perception of what is healthy, I'm like, hey, this is actually really dysfunctional, and this is exactly why X, Y, and Z happened, or why your lab looks like this, right?
And it might be somebody who's eating real. I have a client, like I have a few I can think of, who eat so well. They eat better than me in terms of nutrient quality, but because they eat such good nutrient quality, they're full all the time. They barely eat calories. I have other clients who exercise wonderfully. They're super consistent, but they're doing CrossFit, and what their trends are showing is, we need to somehow turn down some stress dials, and you're not realizing, if your goal is fertility, this modality right now, not always, not forever, but right now, this is not supporting what you're saying your goal is. So we need to shift it. So a lot of times people will look at just the labs, or just, okay, I'm looking at this GI map and here's the gut protocol. That's why we specialize in, okay, like I was a personal trainer first, then I was a nutrition coach, then I got functional certified, right? Because we really want to look at the whole person. So we have our clients track all their food. That's why we program individual programmed workouts. That's why it's not a cookie cutter thing for every single person, because all of those components are really, really important. And again, there are good doctors out there. So when you're seeking any sort of practitioner or healthcare team, look for somebody who's open, even if it's not their specialty, to say, ooh, this is important. What did that person say? I have a client right now who she's working with a Lyme disease specialist. But it's so cool seeing that these providers are like, oh, yeah, they want this client to also work on nutrition. And the doctor's like, I'm not a nutrition specialist. I'm glad that this person's walking you through a build phase, because that's important. Right? So like, look for providers who are open to actually healing you versus only treating the symptoms and dismissing any other things outside of their realm.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that point, in terms of like the body and the lifestyle and the behaviors and adaptations, all of those things, we want answers, and I get that, right? We want to understand the body and we want validation, but interpretation isn't enough, right? It has to become lived change. And we have to make sure that we're looking at full patterns and correlating it with everything. And again, 2 different panels can show the same marker, the same range, the same whatever, and have 2 totally different drivers of that dysfunction. So we have to look at the full picture. And then there's also an issue of sequencing and the order that we do things, right? And this is something I talk about a lot. Because again, there are women who are like, I'm bloated, so I need to fix my gut, or my PMS is really bad, so I have estrogen dominance and I need to fix it. And it's like, okay, why are you estrogen dominant? We have to look at your gut, and is it recirculating estrogen because you're inflamed and you have gut dysbiosis? We have to look at liver, and again, is it clearing and converting things properly? Like, we have to go through this, and then we have to look at your lifestyle, your nutrition, your toxin exposure. We have to look at all of these different things and say, like, what drove you to that point? Like, I want to get you symptom relief, but I also want to make sure that we resolve that issue and that we don't return back to it, right? And that comes down to knowing what is the actual driving problem. So I think the gap with lab interpretation, or what can be present even in the functional space, is still treating symptoms. knowing that a good protocol on paper can still fall short if it doesn't account for the human and the lifestyle and the behaviors and the execution of it. So we have to recognize those patterns. We have to go through proper sequencing. And then again, we have to translate it into a plan that the body can actually respond to. So to Jess's point, when we were talking about how, the body and the lifestyle and like, okay, you don't have to get functional labs. These are the changes that you can make to get healthy anyway. We also have to understand that in the context that we do have somebody who comes in and gets all these functional labs done, can they execute the gut protocol to the extent that we want, right? And it's knowing that there are levels and accommodations to that. Now, there are some things that I'm like, hey, X, Y, and Z is like non-negotiable if you want to fix your gut. Like, for example, if you have gut dysbiosis and you're complaining to me every single day about your bloat, but you eat 4 protein bars a day, or you have wine every night to quote unquote relax, there are certain things that I'm like, hey, this is going to hold you back from actually getting the outcome that you want in your head, right? And then there are other things where it's like, hey, making X, Y, and Z changes, if you are adding 2 or 3 fruits and veggies a day, if you're getting more hydrated, if you're whatever the change is, right? There are things that you can do that we can scale and adjust the protocol to meet you where you're at. But at some point, there is a balance between us holding you to a higher standard and knowing that you have to make a change to see a change, right? So we want to meet you where you're at and knowing, hey, if I can't execute this full gut protocol, that's fine, but it might take a little longer to go through the healing process versus somebody who's like, tell me exactly what to do and I'll do it, no questions asked. And there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's what works best for you and what feels most doable and realistic, because I can make you the perfect gut protocol, but if you can't execute it, then that gut protocol is just a piece of paper, just like the labs, right? So we have to understand what is required of us to see those changes and heal. We have to have the right expectations about the timeline, because healing is a journey. You really should anticipate a good 4 to 6 months of proper execution to see true healing of like gut balance, hormone regulation, any of those things that are being presented to us. And then knowing from a physique side of things, like I just had a conversation with a client who's like, I have bloat issues, but I want to lose 10 pounds, but I want all these things. And I'm like, all right, let me break this down for you. You have these gut issues. You're not willing to test, which is fine, but I can't help you because you're also not tracking your food. So I have no data. I have no information to help you. I'm not going to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. You have to say, I accept my symptom right now, or you have to do something to change it. I am not a magician at the end of the day as a functional practitioner. My knowledge is irrelevant in your landscape if I have nothing to go off of. I can't guess. So I think understanding like what it takes and what those labs can do for us, they're incredibly valuable. So I know we're giving like a lot of nuance to this, but I think it's really important to understand, again, conventional versus functional, how we're actually looking at it through functional, the things that matter beyond the piece of paper with all the lab markers on it, and treating's not the right word, addressing the individual's problems, symptoms, concerns, goals, outcomes, all of those things, and correlating it with symptoms, with the person, with the lifestyle, with the labs, with everything that entails. So,
and adding on to that, like what good lab interpretation should practice. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, Jill. We have to cut this out because I'm drawing a blank, but I had a really good point for a second.
Oh no. What good lab?
Oh, timeline. Okay. So going back to what Jill said about like what good lab interpretation should practice and saying like, realistically, it takes 4 to 6 months. This is not us saying, okay, here's a 30-day protocol and you'll be great after. We just like we do, honestly, with metabolic adaptation and physique, we need to see how your body is responding. So liver flush protocol, right? Okay. Some of them may be a little bit different in terms of supplements that we recommend and stuff, but we have a pretty standard one that we specifically recommend for clients. It doesn't mean every single person sees great change after 14 days. Some people still are experiencing terrible detox type symptoms in week 2. And I say, okay, we need to do a 3rd week of this before we enter into your gut protocol. Our gut protocol, right? We write out a rough outline of, okay, the kill phase is going to be this long because you have these wacky overgrowths. Then the repair phase is going to be this long. Guess what? At week 4, or if we say, hey, between week 4 and 6, we're going to move from this phase to that. And then we see that well, you have way more overgrowth than the average person. We may need to stay in that phase longer, and we're going to tell you the why behind it at each step based on your body, because really symptoms at that point should be like 80% better before we just move into the next phase. We might need to rotate in different antimicrobials or something, right? So it's just not cut and dry. And I think, again, it's like this instant gratification culture of, but you told me that it's going to be a 2-week thing. Like, so again, we really try to do a good job setting expectations on this and saying, here's the things we're going to look for along the way. Hopefully it can take this long, but here's what we might be in for. Just because I think a lot of people expect like, yay, one and done. I did a 30-day thing. And now I can just dump crappy food back. Now I can just dump crappy food back into my system and I should be processing it perfectly. And it's like, well, you've been developing these issues for years and years and years. And then you expect it to just flip because you eliminated gluten for 30 days? Like, no.
And the protocol itself, the reason that I don't do, okay, here's your labs, here's your protocol. I have a client right now who has done a lot of gut protocols previously. And I'm always very intentional with every client, but I'm watching her like a hawk. I'm like every single variable that changes, I'm documenting it because I have had to significantly manipulate her protocol from day one because I was like, wait, this is actually telling me X, Y, and Z. So my original thought, now we're here and we need to do this instead. I know I said your kill phase might be 4 to 6 weeks. This thing is being stubborn. Your symptoms have not resolved to the extent that I anticipated them by this point. We have to extend this. We have to change this. We have to manipulate this. Now you're in the repair phase, but I think we need to keep in X, Y, and Z as we enter this phase to ensure that I fixed blah, 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 right? So understanding that. And also the flush, to Jess's point about detox symptoms. We have clients that we have pretty typical dosages that are taken for certain supplements, whatever the case is. And there are times where we have to titrate it back. We have to dial it back because somebody's body isn't ready for that level of detox. We have to manipulate things. So for me to—
And then there's other times
on a piece of paper and give it to you, that's not responsible to me as a provider because so many things can go wrong. And you're going to be like, fuck, I just paid a lot of money for this girl to order these tests, interpret them, and build a protocol. And it's fucking wasted because I don't know how to manipulate it based on—
Because we're not looking week to week based on your symptoms and you as a person, which is what we do, melding together coaching with our strength training and nutrition background with functional stuff. We're able to look week to week and then adjust as we need to. And again, I'm saying worst case because I just want people to have realistic expectations. There are some times where, like, I have a woman now who I expected her to have pretty bad detox symptoms based on her labs. And she's like, yep, little bit of brain fog, but I'm chilling. And she's following the protocol to a T, right? So sometimes it's like, perfect. We're going to be in and out of this because her body seems to be handling it really well, right? So again, I don't want to say that that's the expectation. It's just, I always want to give, here's how long it could take, because realistically, I don't want you to be disappointed if in 12 weeks you're not a perfect shining example of health because it's been years and years on your system of the opposite.
Yeah. And not to mention, just because I ran your labs and made you a gut protocol, if you're not executing it, then the timeline.
That's a whole nother thing, right? Then we're having very realistic conversations of, well, here's what's going on and we need to crank up the inputs. So, okay. Also, I want to bring you guys back because I think we're going deep in a lot of these different areas. The next several weeks, what we want to go over with you guys is specific lab trends. So like, hey, here are some thyroid patterns. Here are some thyroids of people who have PCOS. We're going to do that over the next few weeks because I think that can be more interesting from a standpoint of, okay, these are all scenarios of how we operate with our clients. That will be more specific of, okay, here you can pull up your labs and you may or may not have all the markers that we look at, but here's the patterns that we would look for.
Yep. So ultimately, again, conventional versus functional, make sure that you are asking a question that provider is there to answer, right? We can't go in and ask for nutrition recommendations from our PCP. That's just not what they're there for. And then knowing, are we there to detect a disease and be a little bit reactive with our health, or are we looking through a more proactive, optimal vitality type of lens, right? No matter what, it takes lifestyle changes to course correct. But knowing that symptoms are often present well before a lab marker enters what is deemed an abnormal range through conventional medicine. So don't let anybody gaslight you. And again, conventional medicine certainly has a time and a place, but you have to understand the lens that you're looking through. You have to understand that health comes from the way that you live your life, right? It's the body, it's the environment, it's the stress, it's all of those things that have to be considered. And then knowing too that, yes, we want you to get symptom relief because you don't feel good, but I also want you to understand what it actually means to be healthy for your body. What types of things are you at higher risk for, right? If somebody has Hashimoto's versus somebody that doesn't, there are probably things that, okay, your body has gotten to that point of autoimmunity and attacking itself. You have to know that you're at higher risk for X, Y, Z because your body's in that state, right? And it doesn't mean the person without Hashimoto's isn't at risk for those things, but that thing isn't there under the surface now. So just knowing what lens we're looking through, what does it mean for you to be healthy? And ultimately, at the end of the day, if you are investing in yourself in any capacity, I want to make sure that not only do I resolve the problem, but that it doesn't come back 3, 6, 12 months from now or whatever the case is, so that you know how to manage that forever. And again, just live a really healthy, full life. Ultimately, I want you to feel good and I want everyone to thrive. So again, conventional has its time and a place, but it's really there more for through looking at it through a pathological lens and that screening information for those disease states, but functional, and our role in this space and industry and world is that we want to ensure that you move well and that you have healthy bones and that you have a healthy environment and you understand how to create that for yourself, and that you don't take a symptom and run with it, that you really know how to look at the full picture for yourself and advocate for yourself. Because if you don't feel good, you know your body best, and you are the best spokesperson for your body and what you're experiencing, but you have to be open and receptive to the changes that are required of you to not feel that way anymore. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys. I know that Jess and I are the queen of like nuance and caveats, but that's the point of this podcast, is really to give you every angle and every explanation we can think of. So that
we would love
make your
feedback. We would love feedback on our podcast episodes too, because I know we have some that are like, okay, here's a specific topic about workouts, or here's a kind of a simple dial it back. A couple weeks ago we did like, hey, bring it back to the basics. Do you guys enjoy these more dense topics where we're kind of educating you on these different things? Do you enjoy the simple lifestyle stuff? Hit us up on social media, let us know, request different topics, because we want to hear feedback from you guys too. So thanks for listening.
Cool. That's all. We'll see you guys next time.